Yellowstone Supervolcano's explosive secret. How to stop a volcano. This is by Science Focus. Yellowstone Park holds an explosive secret beneath the idyllic mountains and forests and rivers that make this U.S. national park the first national park of the country. Can we stop a volcanic eruption that would destroy our civilization? This is by Bill McGuire. Yellowstone is no ordinary volcano. 3 times in the last couple of million years, this so-called supervolcano, located in the western U.S., has blown itself apart in some of the biggest explosions ever known. The last, which happened around 630,000 years ago, we're talking about the supervolcano because this has erupted since then as well, pumped out enough ash to cover most of the country and left behind a giant crater, the Yellowstone caldera, more than 44 miles across. The huge volumes of sulfur gas blasted into the atmosphere by the eruption would have blotted out the sun, causing global temperatures to plunge and spawning a volcanic winter that lasted for several years. But Yellowstone is still restless. Earthquakes are common, the ground repeatedly swells and sinks, and the area is peppered with boiling springs, mud pots, and geysers. Over 60% of the world's hydrothermal features are here, and they have over 10,000 hydrothermal features. Not all of them are yet mapped. A gigantic body of magma still lurks beneath the volcano, so another massive eruption could happen sometime in the future. There are concerns that the resulting volcanic winter might destroy our civilization, but not if we can take action to try and stop it first. And that's just what Brian Wilcox and the team of researchers at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory have proposed. The idea is to drill into Yellowstone to let off steam, quote unquote. Of course, there are those in U.S. Geological Survey that are totally against anyone touching Yellowstone because they might just set off what they're trying to stop. I've often been asked about this particular solution, and my answer has always been that such a venture would be akin to sticking a drawing pin in the elephant's bottom. In other words, the effect would be pretty much zero. But NASA has given the idea a little more thought and come up with something that might actually work. This is geoengineering on a huge scale. In NASA's plan, the drawing pin becomes an 8-kilometer deep borehole drilled into Yellowstone's hydrothermal system. This is a vast body of hot underground groundwater that surrounds the magma chamber and feeds the springs and the geysers. The hydrothermal system absorbs more than 2/3 of the heat generated by the magma. In NASA's scheme, huge quantities of cold water would be pumped down the borehole, helping the hydrothermal system suck out even more heat, the idea being that the magma would cool, get stickier, and start to congeal, and this in turn would mean that it was too viscous to rise towards the surface and feed an eruption. If Yellowstone were ready to blow, it would need to be cooled by 35% to stop the eruption in its tracks, and this would not come cheap. NASA estimates the cost would be about $3.5 billion. It would take hundreds or even thousands of years to accomplish, which is a long time to keep the politicians to hold the purse strings on board. Wilcox acknowledges that this would not be easy and cautions against doing anything without a detailed study of the pros and cons. He says, I think it would be unlikely and even foolish to attempt this at any scale unless a thorough modeling effort had been conducted which shows that the possibility of triggering an eruption was low, almost zero, he said. But there is good news. Superheated water, returning to the surface via the borehole, could be used to drive turbines and generate energy for the region, which could cover much of the cost. Quote, if it appears possible that economically competitive geothermal power could be produced as part of the defanging of a supervolcano, this could close the economic equation sufficiently that people might attempt it, Wilcox observes, perhaps a little optimistically. There are dangers, of course, and there is a possibility that drilling into a volcano that's primed and ready to go might trigger the blast it's trying to prevent. But with the catastrophic consequences for humans of a future super eruption, it might turn out to be a risk we have to take. Now, how does this work? NASA wants to pump the water into Yellowstone volcano to make the magma too sticky to rise. The first thing they do, an 8-kilometer deep borehole is drilled into the hydrothermal system. The second thing, the vast body of hot underground water. The groundwater surrounds the shallow magma chamber and absorbs more than 2/3 of the heat generated there. 3, huge quantities of water are pumped down the borehole, cooling the hydrothermal fluid so that they can suck out even more of the magma's heat. 4, the magma cools and starts to congeal, making it more difficult for it to reach the surface and feed an eruption. 5, superheated water returned to the surface via the borehole could be used to drive turbines and generate electricity. And as we said before, the geologists from the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory for the USGS do not want anyone to touch Yellowstone. They believe it will not work, and they believe it will only speed up and perhaps trigger the volcanic eruption that they're trying to mitigate. In the meantime, the latest from Yellowstone is that we had 127 earthquakes rocking Yellowstone, 26 struck in a swarm. This is on Express UK Sebastian Ketley. Yellowstone volcano was hit by 127 earthquakes in March this year, with 26 deep quakes striking the supervolcano in a single swarm, according to the U.S. Geological Survey. The Yellowstone volcano monitoring stations recorded an incredible 127 tremors throughout the national park, 46 more earthquakes than in February, so that's a big difference. Yellowstone seismicity in March included 2 terrifying earthquake swarms, which struck on March 25th and March 28th, respectively. The first earthquake swarm, picked up by the University of Utah seismograph stations, saw a total of 26 local events, quote-unquote, erupt between March 25th and March 26th. The earthquakes were recorded roughly 16 miles east-northeast of West Yellowstone in Montana. According to USGS, the individual quakes ranged in strength from magnitude 1.9 to just magnitude 0.1. The second swarm erupted just 3 days later, about 9 miles west of Old Faithful Geyser in Wyoming, and the USGS said in its monthly report, March seismicity in Yellowstone included 2 swarms of earthquakes. The first swarm of 26 local events occurred 16 miles east-northeast of West Yellowstone, Montana, from March 25th to 26th, ranging in magnitude from 0.1 to 1.9. And the second smaller swarm of 17 local earthquakes occurred 9 miles west of Old Faithful, March 28th, ranging from magnitude 0.1 to 2.0. The U.S. Geological Survey said earthquake swarms like these are a natural occurrence throughout Supervolcano Park, and earthquake swarms account for roughly 50% of all seismicity in Yellowstone. Out of the 127 total earthquakes, the strongest tremor to struck Yellowstone was on March 4th. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events. events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.